Township Zoning Board of Appeals to order this Tuesday, December 14th. May we please have a roll call?
Hausman? Hausman?
That's you.
Yes, here.
Gonzalez?
Here.
Stuzinski?
Here.
Cook?
Here.
I show Wolf as excused, absent excused, and Mr. Ewan?
Yes.
Alternate.
Thank you. And now regarding the agenda, does anybody on the board have a conflict of interest or a potential thereof? Hearing none. Approval of the agenda, please.
I'll move to approve the agenda of December 14th of the East Bay Township Zoning Board of Appeals.
Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passed. And now approval of the minutes from the 11/16/2021 regular meeting.
We'll also move to approve the minutes of the 11/16/2021 regular meeting of the East Bay Charter Township Zoning Board of Appeals.
Okay.
I wasn't here for that one. so.
Okay.
Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. And prior to public comment, I'd like to invite Mr. Taylor to tell us a bit about public comment expectations and something about tonight's agenda.
As you know, we've already had a public hearing on what we're here for tonight, and on Appeal 821 and 921, so tonight will be public comment. We are asking that any public comment is per person, reserved to 3 minutes, to the best of your ability, and we would also ask not to use the practice of passing that 3 minutes on to someone else, that if you have something that you want conveyed, that you take the time to do that. And want to also get in there, at each one of your tables are two, call them exhibits. They were two memos that did not make it into the original packet. They were sent to you yesterday, and then paper copies are provided to you today. And also, on page 9 of our sizable packet, I'll read it off. There was an address and a parcel number that was not included, and it is the address and parcel number of the property in question tonight. 1773 US 31 North is the official address. 1773. And the parcel number 03-208-050-00.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And at this time, we'd like to open the meeting up to public comment. Whoever would like to speak, you have 3 minutes. Please step up to the microphone, tell us who you are, your address, and what you'd like us to know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Zoning Board. My name is Christopher Bisdock. I represent the Port Traverse Association, who is the appellant in this matter. I just wanted to recap very briefly because you gave me the consideration of a presentation at the October meeting, and I've provided that to you again, and I don't want to, belabor it all. I think this is a fairly straightforward issue. I just want to make a couple of points. One is we are appealing the zoning administrator's decision. That is different than criticizing his work. We understand there was some discussion between the zoning department and TC Water Sports that led to the letter that we appealed. We just weren't in the room for that. And so we have rights, and we're pursuing those rights now. TC Water Sports is a separate business, which is located at the Sugar Beach property. It is not an accessory use. It is not incidental to the Sugar Beach use. It is not integral to the Sugar Beach use. You'll recall that we had lots of documentation that vessels are brought in from other places, advertisements are made in other places, registration and sign-ups are made in other places. People are directed to Sugar Beach. TC Water Sports, under your ordinance, again, just recapping, generates impacts on Port Traverse that are greater than Sugar Beach. There was some discussion. There was a very lengthy discussion kind of in the back half of the October meeting where that was being denied. But again, I think you heard the testimony from the people who live there day in and day out about where are the nuisance impacts that they're experiencing. They're coming from Sugar Beach, they're coming from TC Water Sports because of where it's located, which is right up against them, because of where it's drawing people across their property, because where the boats activity, where the fuel hauling activity and everything else is going on. And all of that's documented, all of that's in the record. Therefore, TC Water Sports does not qualify as an accessory use. That's not a request to shut them down, that's a request to make them comply with the rules of the zoning ordinance, to go through the proper review like everybody else. We believe that a great part of the history of problems out here is sort of this above-the-law attitude that TC Water Sports has taken. They've said basically not that they comply with the zoning, but not that they've received some approval from the township, but they've said basically, we've been doing this and the time clock for you to do anything about it has expired. We don't think that's correct. We think the analysis by your township attorney explains why that's not correct. We think that there is, if you're going to set a grandfathering date, that date should be 6 years ago and not last year. We've shown you in photographs, they're the last photographs in that presentation, what a huge difference there was from 2015 to 2021 in what was on that site. So if there's going to be some grandfathering, it's grandfathering to what was going on 6 years ago, not grandfathering to what's been going on last year. And that's really, I think, all I had to say for you. I appreciate you hearing us out on this and appreciate you spending, thank you very much. I appreciate you spending the 2 meetings on this and taking the time to make a thoughtful decision. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
At 1717 US 51 North. I just would like to address an important fact. The memorandum dated December 7th, 2021 from Peter Wendling to Claire Kiner and Preston Taylor, and the August 18th, 2021 letter of determination from Mr. Taylor to TC Water Sports. Complaints from Port Traverse residents and their general manager were made to the East Bay Township planning staff prior to 2020, which is what this letter and the memorandum says what was going on. They were made in 2016 that we can document in the form of correspondence and in-person meetings in regards to the expansion and growth of TC Water Sports business in 2015 and 2016. Contact was also made over the years with the general manager, Justin Mortier, at the Sugar Beach Resort. The township asked for some changes to be made by TC Water Sports back in 2016. So they definitely, we've had contact. We took deep breaths and put up with the activities next door until 2019, when the TC Water Sports greatly expanded in 2019 and 2020, adding dock sections, watercraft coming in from other areas, etc. Plans indicate that there still is zero setback with our property line on shore with the check-in building and life jacket boutique. Elmwood Township Planning Commission has established definitions and ordinances pertaining to their waterfront on West Grand Traverse Bay. In fact, they are dealing with issues and land use on their bayfront this evening as well. It might be in the best interest of the 2 townships if they were to meet up and see if they could assist each other in waterfront ordinances, creation of and enforcement of for the future. Thank you for taking your time and serving on this committee and reviewing this appeal. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Joseph Zayas. I represent TC Water Sports. First, let me apologize for receiving those memos late. Apparently, there was some mix-up in the zoning office. I believe they were submitted per the timeline set by the board. A couple of things I wanted to address, and I'm not going to repeat everything in those. You can review that on your own. I'm fully confident in your ability to digest all of that. But it's completely false to say that TC Water Sports thinks they're above the law. TC Water Sports has gone through the Eagle dock permitting process, they've gone through the Army Corps of Engineers process, fought every step of the way by your applicant here, and we're even here because it was suggested, no, you can't just be grandfathered in, we want you to do this. So instead of saying, no, East Bay, we're not dealing with you, we've come here to try to get a fair hearing, to try to work with you on this. And I think it's very clear when you take an objective look at what an accessory use is, that a boat rental facility is an accessory use to a waterfront resort. You really don't need to do much else but drive down Resort Row there in East Bay or through Acme or through Traverse City to see multiple similar operations. And there's really no reason to single out TC Water Sports as being a special example. So to say it's not incidental to a resort or integral to the resort because it brings in business, partially business from other places, isn't the standard. And when you read those memos, you'll see case law supporting that. I also want to point out that this is your regional business district. This isn't a residential area. This is where you want businesses of this sort to be. And those are going to come with some level of noise and distraction. It simply can't be helped. That doesn't mean it's not an accessory use. When you look at the standard, if I can move on, when you look at the standard as to what counts as an added burden, I think it's important to realize it has to be a burden added on to, it can't be a burden added on to the resort. You got to look at TC Water Sports on its own and whether that creates a greater burden than Sugar Beach Resort on its own. And I think it's, despite the claims that you've heard, I think it really strains the imagination to say that a 100-room beachfront resort with a bar on the beach and people playing and everything else isn't going to cause more of a noise and other impacts than renting boats. I also think it's important to point out that this is not a riparian issue. This is not an inland lake where the bottomlands are where someone owns to the center of the lake. There's law cited in those memos regarding the public trust doctrine. The state owns those lands. The state controls those lands. Now, we're willing to work with the applicant and the Army Corps of Engineers to set up a no-wake zone. There's already a slow zone, I think, going out to the bay. We're willing to work with them to set up a no-wake zone. We're willing to work with them to maybe create some sort of channel to the middle. But all those things have to be done because it's Lake Michigan through the Army Corps of Engineers and through Eagle. So I can't address everything in 3 minutes. I think it's well done in the memos. But the reason we're here today is because we don't think we're above the law. If we thought we were above the law, we wouldn't be here trying to work with you people today. But I think when you look at the standard, it's very clear that this is the definition of an accessory use, particularly for a beachfront resort. So I thank you for your time. I thank you for everything that I know you guys put into this. I know it's a difficult job, and thank you for undertaking it.
Thank you. Would anyone else care to speak?
So Barry Boyer, TC Water Sports. Thank you all for coming tonight and for all of the work that's gone into preparing for tonight, all the information you have before you that you've read and reviewed. Just to, I guess, echo on some of the points that we've made in our briefs. Again, we believe that we're part of the intended use for this corridor. hotels, restaurants, boat rentals, tour activities. These are the things that this community has said are important to have in this corridor, that we want to drive people to this area, and we have to find thoughtful ways to do that, and we want to be a part of that solution, not just in honoring our neighbors, but also in providing a service that fits within the master plan for the community. Again, we do believe that there are absolutely areas that we fall under your jurisdiction. There are certain areas where we fall under the Army Corps and the federal government. There are, as we've stated in our memos, 5 states, 2 countries, numerous sovereign Native American nations and treaties that are all, in some way, shape, or form, have an authority over these waters. So we want to make it very clear that we do believe there's an overlap that takes place there. It's one of the reasons why we're here, is because it's a very complicated body of water, but it has also been made quite clear that those are public trust bottomlands held in trust by the state of Michigan. Those are regulated by Eagle and Army Corps through the joint process, which we've gone through monumental amounts of work and time and energy and effort to flesh through literally everything that you guys have heard here through the last couple months. We've gone down this road numerous times already and ended up with what the state and the federal government believe to be a fair and reasonable compromise that would meet everybody's needs here. These uses are very much commonly associated with resorts, with I can't imagine how many resort marinas exist out there, how many amenities hotels offer, whether it's a spa, whether it's a restaurant and bar, a wedding service, or a tour. I've personally operated out of about 30 of those in the last 25 years, and I've consulted about 500 other companies who've had similar arrangements with hotels. So for me personally, to hear that it's not commonly associated or integral to seems quite asinine, in fact. We appreciate the neighbors. We appreciate that they're expressing their opinions here. But there's also this, I think that this set of issues, we really need to be careful to be objective and to look at this from the zoning code. Are we an accessory use or are we not? That's really what we're here for today. Hopefully you can see some of that, and we, again, appreciate you considering our statements today.
Thank you. Would anybody else care to speak tonight?
Good evening. My name is Claire Wilkes, and I reside at 1717 North US Highway 31, Fort Traverse. All I really want to say to you is that, as Sabori is saying, boat rental facilities are a common accessory to a resort. We're not disputing that. What we are disputing is the level of activity at that particular boat rental facility. It is out of all proportion to the size of the hotel, to what the hotel guests might be doing. It is a major activity, and that is our point. I think it constitutes way more than an accessory use. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Good evening. My name is Doug Monroe. I live in Port Traverse, Unit 25. My wife and I have been there for about 20 years. The only point that I have been asked to make is that all of these Eagle and Army Corps permits are subject to local ordinance, and therefore you have the authority to make these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else care to speak this evening? All right, hearing none, we will close this to public comment. And we'll move on to business. Item A, resolution to set ZBA meeting dates and times for 2022. The proposed dates and times are on page 5, if you'd like to review those and let us know if there are any issues, and we might be able to reschedule for your convenience.
November 15th.
What's that?
November 15th.
Oh,
It's no big
okay.
deal. I won't be there for that.
Okay,
I won't see any deer anyway, but I'll be there.
okay.
But anyways, I don't think that's a problem anyways.
Does anyone else have a problem with November 15th?
Same date for me would be tough.
Okay. Should we possibly move that?
I think that's probably a sound idea.
Okay. Do you want to propose an alternate date at this time, or do we want to address this later?
I would ask to be able to have a little bit of time to think on it,
Of course.
please, yeah.
So let's table this item at the moment, and we'll revisit it after sufficient time's passed.
Mr. Chairman, the only thing is that you do want to confirm that you will have your next regular meeting next year on January 11th at least, so you have the next date confirmed.
Yes, sir. So noted. We will have our next meeting on January 11th, and hopefully at that time, we'll be able to also establish the rest of the meeting dates for 2022. And let's move on to Appeal 721 Miller, Port Traverse. This is the second public hearing, discussion, possible action. I would like to start this by asking Mr. Wendling to give us some legal advice as we move forward. There will not be any further public comment on this issue tonight unless somebody on the board has specific questions for anybody who's here. So, Mr. Wendling, please.
Good evening, everybody. Peter Wendling from Young, Graham, and Wendling in Bel Air on behalf of the township. Before you and the attorneys, and it's on part of the packet, everybody has a copy, are proposed general findings of fact and specific findings of fact. This is an appeal of a zoning administrator's administrative decision which determined that the Port Traverse, or not, sorry, the TC Water Sports facility at the Beach Hotel was an accessory use. The opinion also resulted in a capping of the level of boats based upon the 2020 year. And the reason that it came about with capping it is the problem we have is the Fraser case here, the Township of Fraser versus Haney, and that's, I think, addressed in both of the attorneys' materials, and I've addressed it as well. In that case, which is still partly pending, and there's other cases that are looking at it, essentially confirms that a statute of limitations on any enforcement is 6 years, including any enforcement of zoning or police power ordinances. And so what the zoning administrator was looking at the time that the letter was written and why the 2020 date was put in is that, at least that, you know, from the information we had, and I know we had public comment that may have said differently, that the complaints, majority of complaints came in as of 2020. And as you are aware, and under your zoning ordinance, under section 221, it states under 2C that an accessory use shall not generate any effects on neighboring properties, including but not limited to noise, parking, traffic glare, or dust greater than or more burdensome than such impacts from the main use on the property. So even if it's determined to be an accessory use, you know, these complaints came in, and so I think the object on the part of the zoning administrator's opinion was to try and cover all of the angles, so to speak, given that TC Water Sports and I think their predecessors in business there on the property have been operating for more than 6 years, renting out jet skis and other boats. And so that was the reasoning behind the opinion. Now you have an appeal, and the appeal state requests in twofold. One, first determine whether or not it's an accessory use, and the appellants are asking that it be determined that it is not an accessory use, that it should be considered as a standalone type of use in the business district, which frankly it could be, okay, under separate procedures, not before the ZBA, which have not been applied for. The same argument, though, may apply as far as the Fraser versus Haney case, although I think the argument is somewhat weaker because it talks about enforcement as opposed to coming forward, with an application. So it depends on how a party looks at this and how they wish to hang their hat. That's why this case is being vigorously, appealed, and not only in this case, but in other matters. We're looking for some further guidance because when it comes to zoning, in rural townships, and you're still mostly a rural township here, you can't see everything when it occurs, and it's often difficult to discover violations even within a 6-year period of statute of limitations. But we still have to deal with the law as it exists. So the findings of fact that I drafted are very basic as far as the general findings of fact. You can use them, you can make corrections to them. I recommend that when you go through it, you go through first the general findings of fact and make sure that, at least on a straw poll level, everybody is in agreement on the general findings of fact and any deletions or additions which the board may wish to have on that. And under specific findings of fact, I labeled them. And I'll have 3 main ones here. One which would not support the zoning administrator's determination letter of August 18th, 2021, the first one here. And that one basically knocks out the accessory use, as not being a valid argument here. And I can read it for, the benefit of the audience quickly because it's not that long. And the proposed finding is that the board finds that under Section 221, that TC Water Sports, hereinafter Water Sports operations at the Sugar Beach Hotel, hotel, is a substantial standalone commercial boat rental operation which rents to tourists whether they are guests of the hotel or not, and constitutes a substantial and separate primary use of the hotel waterfront during the summer season. The board further finds that water sports operations and rental are not intricately related to the hotel use, and in particular of the hotel's waterfront area. As such, the board finds that the boat rental business is not an accessory use under Section 221 of the zoning ordinance. Now, that finding still doesn't take into consideration the Fraser versus Haney case, and there still could be an argument that, well, if it wasn't accessory, we're doing it anyway, and we did it for more than 6 years ago, and I addressed that later in the third finding, but that's more of a standalone. And you may be able to combine findings or add items on your own as you deem necessary. The second one would support the zoning administrator's letter, a determination in the August 18th letter, and it reads, as suggested, the board finds that the historic use of the hotel waterfront as a boat and jet ski rental facility has occurred for well over a decade without complaint until the 2020 rental season. I understand we had public comment that, refutes that, and we understand that. The board further finds that the zoning administrator reasonably decided to freeze the use with respect to the number of boats at the 2020 level of intensity, as that is the year that the use began to generate complaints from residents at Port Traverse condominium. The board finds that beginning in 2020, the use generated noise in a manner that became more burdensome and as such violated the provision of Section 221.2 lowercase c of the zoning ordinance, such that further expansion from that year would result in a continuous violation. The board finds that the use is an accessory use, and that zoning administrator's letter of August 18, 2021 correctly states that boats in excess of the use in place as of 2020 will result in a violation of Section 221.2c. Now, from an attorney's perspective, Section 221.2c is not my favorite thing for you to have in the zoning ordinance. I've openly expressed this, to the planner. It's one of those types of phrases or provisions that tends to invite litigation and conflict. May occur in other areas, but here often it can be, maybe it's not subjective, but it can be subjective of whether or not this is a problem. But the township received numerous complaints, a majority of which I believe, from the information I received from the township, occurred in 2020, and so that finding kind of goes into the focus as to, well, let's at least address at that point where we're at, because even if it's an accessory use, expanding it further is just going to cause more problems and result in this violation. So it's essentially sort of a semi-cutoff of the accessory use at a certain point. That's the idea behind that finding, so they can move forward. Because the problem with lawful nonconforming uses, whether created under this type of statute of limitations problem that we run into because it wasn't looked at when it started, or a regular lawful nonconforming use, is that the parties can always come in and bring more evidence of a lawful nonconforming use over time. and then you have to, adjust the ball. I mean, we see that often on junkyard type of cases, where, wait a minute, you have, this much junk, now you have, more, and the courts have basically said, a junkyard's a junkyard, it doesn't matter how much is in there. Here, we're trying to use the ordinance in a contractual manner, essentially, if they agree not to appeal, through the letter, saying, look, we're at least going to cut it off here as far as the expansion. If it's not appealed, by the property owner, they'd at least be stuck with what they've accepted here, okay? But of course, the whole thing was appealed, by the neighbors, and so that's where we're at, and they have, a right to do it at this level. The third finding, addresses the statute of limitations issue directly, and it would not support the zoning administrator's determination letter of August 18th, and it's a little bit different. It says the board finds that the use of the hotel property by water sports, jet ski, and boat rental business expanded from the original use as an amenity for hotel guests only to a use which is open to the general public. The board finds that similar uses of hotel properties in the RB Regional Zoning District, Regional Zoning District includes such uses as restaurants within existing hotels, which the Zoning Board of Appeals notes also serve guests other than those staying on any given hotel property. However, the board further finds that the boat rental business by water sports at the hotel includes transfers of boats from off-site facilities, further concentrating the use on the waterfront of the hotel for customers which at this juncture are not necessarily hotel guests, including the movement of boats and the pickup of rental boats from off-site areas being brought to the hotel site. The board further finds that the use has been ongoing for more than 6 years and that the applicable statute of limitations under MCL 600.5813, while precluding enforcement for a violation of the zoning ordinance for this use for transgressions existing 6 years or older, enforcement based upon activity 6 years or younger can occur, allowing for a limitation of the use based upon the existing 2016 use levels. And the reason I'm using that is because the season's done already, and going back 6 years, you're really going back 6 years from this coming May, and not 2020 as provided in the zoning administrator's letter of August 18th, 2021. The board finds that the use is not an accessory use under section 221. So you have two versions, one a little more detailed, okay, taking in the determination of the Frazier case, one less detailed saying that, well, it's just not considered an accessory use. You can, if you're going to use one, it's better probably just to use one, but you could use both and they would be consistent with each other. And then you have the one that would basically support the decision made, by the zoning administrator. I do want to address a few of the legal arguments which you've read in the reports provided by the attorneys. They're both well written, well presented. One is the aggrieved party status. That's something that is there, okay, whether or not Port Traverse is an aggrieved party, but not at this level. That is at the court of, or at the circuit court level where those arguments begin, and I've been through that with the Court of Appeals, and that's the case here. So we're not going to really worry about that argument right now. The other has to do with conflicts of laws where, where perhaps there's federal and state law which supersedes any of the zoning regulations. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I'm sure that's put in there to preserve any arguments which any party may have if this moves forward after the ZBA makes its decision to circuit court, which is a very real possibility, in this case. And that's fine, that's preserved there. But I also note that TC Water Sports was here before the Planning Commission and received a permit for the Irish Boat Shop site for the same type of use. So I don't recall hearing that argument at the Planning Commission, when they came in for that. So I'm not that concerned over that particular argument. And I believe the other attorneys also, recognize the Frazier case and where it stands, and it has to be addressed. But basically, those are your choices, and I'm here to answer any questions which any of the board members may have at this point.
Okay, thank you. All right, this is open to the board for discussion and possible action. I'd like to suggest that we start out on page number 9 with the general findings of fact and simply move through the list. Is everybody okay with that?
I was just going to have one question, but if you want to wait, we can wait. Oh, I was just going to say, can we do a different specific findings of fact, like a number 4? Because I do think it's an accessory use, and maybe I'm jumping the gun, but can't we just be as simple as cap it at 2016 use levels? Can it be that simple, or am I?
Well, that's basically what the third one does.
But that basically says we don't agree that it's an accessory use. I agree it's accessory use, but I think
Oh, I
it's
see what
excessive.
you mean. Yeah, you can do that. I mean,
Okay, that's all
these are only drafts that
Okay,
to guide
that's
you
what I'm
and
saying.
help you. You can adopt them, you can change them, and you can
Yeah.
also create your own.
Because everyone can disagree with you, but that's what I
Just
think.
make sure you
Yeah.
know what, attach at least one or more exhibits that support.
Well,
your
that's good.
position.
That might be tricky for me. I'll probably need some help with that one, but maybe no one agrees with me either, so.
That's fine.
Right. Everybody else okay? All right? Yes, sir.
If the board finds that it's not an accessory use, what does that do to the resolution that was made by the trustees in March of this year?
That has to do with the the ability to just build on the bottom land, okay? So it doesn't.
Okay, so it would have no effect on
It
that?
would have no effect on, because, under the ordinance, they frankly can come back for a separate, I believe, a special use permit in that district for this type of use, but that's not what's been done.
Okay, I was just wondering if there was a conflict there.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else at this time? All right, let's start with number 1, which states, "The board finds that the Sugar Beach Hotel is located at 1773 US 31 North." And has a property identification number of 03-208-050-00, herein referred to as the property. That's pretty easy to affirm, isn't it? Anybody disagree? All right. Number 2, the board finds that the property is located in the regional business zoning district.
Yep.
Everybody okay? Number 3, the board finds that hotels and motels are a permitted use under section 412 in the regional business district. Any discussion? Okay. Number 4, the board finds that accessory uses related to uses permitted by right are also permitted in the regional business district under section 412 of the East Bay Charter Zoning Ordinance. Good? Please speak out if you have any issues or questions. Number 5, the board finds that accessory uses is a term defined under section 1402A of the East Bay Charter Township Zoning Ordinance as follows: whenever an activity, which may or may not be separately listed as a principal use, is conducted in conjunction with another principal use and the former use, 1, constitutes only an incidental or insubstantial part of the total activity that takes place on the lot, or number 2, is commonly associated with a principal use and integrally related to it, then the former use may be regarded as accessory to the principal use and may be carried on underneath the umbrella of the permit issued for the principal use.
Good.
All right. Number 6, the board finds that accessory uses are also further defined under section 221, which under subsection 2 of section 221 provides for the interpretation of accessory uses, which includes under section 221.2.c the following language: an accessory use shall not generate any effects on neighboring properties, including but not limited to noise, parking, traffic, glare, or dust greater than or more burdensome than such impacts from the main use on the property. Okay, that's verbatim out of the ordinance. Number 7, the board finds that this issue was reviewed by zoning administrator Preston Taylor in his letter to Jeff Bensley at TC Water Sports dated August 18th, 2021. The board further finds that the zoning administrator determined that the use of renting motorized jet skis and boats would exceed what is considered an accessory use under section 221.2.c if the number of jet skis and boats to be used or rented on site exceeded 16 jet skis and 10 boats, as was the number of such watercraft during the summer season of 2020 when complaints from the public, including residents of the Port Traverse Condominium Association, first occurred in the summer of 2020. So I do have a question about this one. Are there any documented complaints that the township has record of prior to 2020?
That's probably a question for Preston, because I'm not aware of any. This issue was brought to my attention in 2020. So,
Thank you.
Documented, I don't think so. Dave, the office, as I understand it, did receive phone calls, but I don't know of any documented cases where any type of letter, violation or letter of information was sent out on that.
Okay, thank you. So with that in mind, does anybody have discussion or opinion on item 7?
I just got one quick thing. I'm trying simplifying this again, but is water sports, are you okay for, is this going to be your final thing ever, 16 jet skis and 10 boats, period? Is that what we're talking here? It's always going to be a violation, right? If it exceeds that, is that finite? Is it going to be, are you ever going to try, because that might help the bartering process, quite frankly, because we're going to go in
asking
circles.
questions. Superior Board, TC Water Sports. After numerous conversations with Claire Carner,
Yep.
and I believe that may have involved Peter Wendling on this issue, I'm not sure. But we basically said we're willing to voluntarily agree to that cap as, you know, a clear path to solution.
Okay.
Thank you.
And subject to, do we give civil infractions for that, or is this the violation letter? Is it, how does that work?
There's a process where they would be, you know, made aware of
Yeah.
a violation. If
Couple.
our office received it and we looked into it, they could eventually.
Yeah, so that's what we do too, a couple letters of information, and then a letter of violation, and then civil infractions and stuff. Okay, but so then you're agreeable for 16 jet skis and 10 boats and never to exceed that, subject to
Right. That was a
enforcement?
voluntary.
Okay, I wasn't sure on that one. Okay, that helps me out.
I just want to clarify on that. When we use the term "to be used" or "rented," used means a total of 16 and 10, irrespective of if any other craft are moored or kept in another location.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
What I'm saying is that on-site, if you had 16 jet skis and 10 boats,
That we
but
would not-
off-site, you've got 20 boats,
that
all
we
right?
would not rent any more than 16, and, I mean, technically, they're all boats.
Well, I know they're all boats, they're all
Which is, I
watercraft.
mean, I know they're being distinguished as boats and jet skis, but jet skis are boats, and boats are not necessarily jet skis, just like a rectangle is a square, and a square's not necessarily.
Yet a distinction is being made.
We're making that distinction, and we're trying to say,
Well, I understand that. I'm just saying, I'm asking that if we have a number here and it says on-site, okay, used or on-site, you have, let's say, 10 jet skis and, 16 jet skis and 10 boats on-site at Sugar Beach. But you also may have 5, 6, 7 other boats or jet skis or watercraft, whatever, at another location. Would you be bringing those in, and let's say 4 go out, but you bring 4 more in? You following me?
we're
You
saying
o-
that the total would never exceed 10 and 16.
Period.
It would not exceed that,
Okay, thanks. I'm
period.
looking for, you know, what the loophole could be.
Yeah, we're trying to eliminate loopholes and make it clear for you. We would not rent more than 10 boats and 16 jet skis from
Right,
Sugar Beach.
and I just want it clear that for everybody in the audience, what we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so can we affirm number 7? See any issues? All right.
Can I just identify 2 documents for the record?
No, sir. If we have questions, we'll let you know, okay? All right, number 8, the board finds that the applicant requests in the alternative that should TC Water Sports be allowed to continue the rental of jet skis and boats at the Sugar Beach Hotel as an accessory use, that the number be reduced to the number of jet skis and boats that as existed during I think there's a missing word here.
Oh, just it should be taken out during and at the end. The should be deleted.
Okay, thank you. So, again, the board finds that the applicant requests in the alternative that should TC Water Sports be allowed to continue the rental of jet skis and boats at the Sugar Beach Hotel as an accessory use, that the number be reduced to the number of jet skis and boats as existed during and at the end of the summer boating season of 2015.
And we may have to say 2016, since we're now in December of, the 6 years ago, and we're past that.
Right, and do we have any knowledge of whether 2016's total watercraft is the same as 2020?
I do not have the numbers from 2016.
Okay,
Well, how are we going to agree with all these general findings of fact? You can't agree with 7 and then agree with 8 if we don't know what the number is. That's,
yeah, so are we presuming that 2016 and 2020 are the same number of boats, or?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
It's not inconsistent, because the one has to do with what was set forth in the zoning administrator's decision, locking in those numbers based upon what we knew in 2020. The other would be more, the burden of proof would be on TC Water Sports if we had to look back at the 2016. That's yet to be determined. I believe that there's even some difficulty in determining, 2015, although there's evidence in the file here that the use was certainly less at that time than the 10 boats and 16 jet skis that occurred in 2020. So it would be definitely less than that.
Okay, so we have some knowledge of that.
Yes.
So what do you think of that one, board?
again, can we agree with both 7 and 8? I don't think we can we? I mean, quite frankly.
That's what we're working through.
And how do we prove what was in 2015? Or 16, I should.
Well, that's going to be, that would be done through zoning staff. But if you want to, you can basically toss 8, so that's fine, it's up to you. But zoning staff would have to determine, and the same thing, if you make a determination saying, look, this is not an accessory use, we recognize what, the statute of limitations, so you're stuck with whatever it is in 2016, and then we basically do our forensic best, using all the evidence we have at hand to make that determination, okay?
What do you think it was? Or anyone?
Preston, you might better often answer that, but I think.
Because absence of proof, I mean,
It's my understanding that in the last few years, it has grown substantially. So to give
Okay.
you a number,
Yeah.
Carl, would be improper for me to do.
okay.
We can certainly ask the applicant, he's here, or the,
Yeah, we
Or
could
the
do
owner.
that, couldn't we?
But would
Agree on it.
some of the documentation we do have is related to, I guess, some of the dock permitting
Yes.
that preceded some of the changes
Which
that
was for a
happened in
less amount, this
2020.
one.
So
Yeah.
it kind of outlines what accommodations are there on the dock, and I think the determination could be made off of that.
Okay.
that's a good source of it, it's true.
All
'Cause
right.
I think that was
Good
from
point.
the original permit back in '07 or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Yep.
But related to this number 8 finding of fact, I mean, I think, right, this number 8, we're just agreeing that the applicant has requested that the finding of the fact is that the applicant has requested that this be the case, not to necessarily decide on what the number is, but
Okay,
this is
okay,
what they've
okay.
asked for.
Yeah, in the alternative.
This seems
that's what the applicant's
contradictory.
asked for. Either it's non-accessory use, or in the alternative, whether it is or isn't, that they're relegated to the statute of limitations. term.
Okay, now I got you.
Okay, everybody okay with that
I'm
now?
glad, yeah, thanks for clarifying that.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah, I'm fine with
Okay,
that.
good. All right, at this time, do you want to find any other facts, or should we move on to specific findings? What's on your minds? All right, on to specific findings of fact. Findings of fact which would not support the zoning administrator's determination letter of August 18th, 2021. Number one, the board finds that under section 221, that TC Water Sports, hereinafter Water Sports operations at the Sugar Beach Hotel, hereinafter hotel, is a substantial standalone commercial boat rental operation which rents to tourists, whether they are guests of the hotel or not, and constitutes a substantial and separate primary use of the hotel waterfront during the summer season. The board further finds that water sports operations and rental are not integrally related to the hotel use, and in particular of the hotel's waterfront area. As such, the board finds that the boat rental business is not an accessory use under section 221 of the zoning ordinance. So we need to work through this because, as Mr. Windling said, it's the key to the application. And we can see under section 221, 2A, B, and C, the interpretation of accessory uses, and seems like it's appropriate to discuss these and pick a direction. I'll open it up to the board.
Yeah. First of all, let me say that this is something that I think all of us have spent a lot of time reviewing and looking at. And it seems to me that the issue before us right now is really only one, and that is this an accessory use? That's the issue. The other issues with respect to, I would say, the noise and things like that, it's subjective. I mean, we just don't know. What's noisy to one is not noisy to somebody else. So personally speaking, my thought process is that I was trying to work on what do we mean by accessory? What was the intent of accessory? I went back to the original agreement that was, let's say, made in February of 2007, dated, I think it was March of 2007. And in that, the township did in fact give the approval for the application of bottom land to Sugar Beach, but then it said that they stated specifically that the understanding was to have said dock to be limited to the residents and guests of the Sugar Beach Resort and not used for any other commercial purposes. So that gave me the impression, or at least that the intent, was that when we talk about an accessory use, it's going to be right there. That's where it is. So then the question then becomes, okay, what's an accessory use? Now, I've seen a lot of discussion, and I went back to the last meeting in October and sat through that again, and that was fun. And examples we use for things such as restaurants or a gift shop in a hotel. And I said, okay, fine, so we have that, and I understand that. So then the question says, what happens if the hotel closes? What happens to that business that's in the hotel, that accessory use or amenity that's in that hotel? The answer is they close. There's nothing to keep them there. So then the question becomes, okay, fine, if Sugar Beach closed, how does that affect TC Water Sports? However, since that time, TC Watersports has increased their advertising and have satellite locations at other facilities, not necessarily putting people on boats, but they do have satellite locations for sales and to, let's say, negotiate whatever contracts would be. You then go and pick up your boat at the other hotel. But nonetheless, there are satellite locations which says, now we've expanded out to other locations. The other item is, there is, Irish Boat Shop coming up. That's going to be a separate and independent location. So then the question comes to me, if the Sugar Beach, whatever, closed down, can TC Water Sports exist outside the corpus of where they were? So now they're no longer an accessory. They're not dependent on that. So I came to the conclusion that based on, my logic and the examples that I'm using, that they have now, with their success, now become something which is not necessarily integral to that hotel, nor are they anymore an accessory business. They are an independent business standing for other operations and could exist if the original location was no longer there. So now that's my thought process on that. And of course, it could be, challenged, and that's fine. But that's where I'm going, that they can exist as a separate business. Now, this does not mean that even with that decision, that TC Water Sports closes down. They're still there. They still have the opportunity to work. They just have to work now under a different status. That's all.
Thank you.
Well, I still think it's an accessory use. And we can't play what if it closes. It's not closed now, so it's an accessory.
No, I'm not saying they're going to close. I was saying using the idea of trying to define, for our definition in the ordinance going forward, should we not consider, when we talk about accessory uses, the multiplicity of location? Not just say, this is it. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying,
I understand what you're saying.
yeah.
Okay. Did you have more, Carl?
No, just that.
Okay. Mr. Cook?
Oh, it's a tough one. I guess in a perfect world, when Sugar Bay Beach Resort was built, this would have been identified as an accessory use then. One thing, going all the way back to when it was built in, 95 or so, when the documentation we've got here in our packet, there's no accommodations, there's no mention of it, there's no calculation of parking spaces. That's something that kind of stuck out to me. I know that's a pretty hot topic for a lot of planning commission reviews, site plan reviews, is what are the parking requirements? But nevertheless, looks like they went through a process back in '07 with the township, got some dock approvals, and that was sort of accepted at that time as an accessory use. Hey, we've got this amenity that's attached to the hotel, and I've kind of echo Paul's sentiment. I guess I'm sort of on the fence right now with the idea of whether or not it is an accessory use. But I feel more comfortable agreeing that it's an accessory use under the premise of the 2007 language of, this is only for hotel guests. Once, it's expanded beyond that and, business is being done at, potentially other locations and bringing guests to the hotel for the sole purpose of renting pontoon boats and jet skis versus staying in the hotel and renting a room, it sort of, in my mind, goes outside the concept of an accessory use in this application. So, my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. And for what it's worth, I'm also somewhat on the fence, but I'm more inclined to agree with Mr. Cook and Mr. Gonzalez. I also am drawn to item C under section 221.2, and I can see where the current use may generate effects on neighboring properties more burdensome than such impacts from the main use of the property. That's just my opinion.
Well, yeah, like everyone says, this is a tough one, but.
It is.
I want to hear, since think I'm the only one that agrees with Preston, I want to know your thought, why you think it's accessory use, because I have asked people where I work, and they all agree with you, but, so let me hear your thought process.
Well,
Because
based
I can
on-
go, I'm starting to agree with everyone now, and that's not a good sign, but.
Why not?
At
What's
the
up,
time
yeah.
this letter was written, obviously prior to public comment,
Yep.
more information came out, and speaking with our planner, looking at the historic use of TC Water Sports, and looking at the ordinance to me, and my coworkers, it just appeared to fit in that bubble of an accessory use.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Well, I think it is. I mean, I shouldn't use Florida as an example, but every hotel in Florida has these options for water rentals and this and that and this. So I do agree it's accessory use, but I do agree that it's excessive, quite frankly, because I understand the complaints. But anyways, I agree it's accessory use. That's the only stumbling I got, because if it does go to court, which it's going to, we all know that now, that's what they're going to talk about is accessory use. And so that's where you got to avoid the judicial scrutiny a little bit here, because there's going to be some.
Sure.
I want to make one comment. You know, I heard it at the last meeting, and I've heard it tonight. Yes, I agree with the general findings of fact that the hotel is in the regional business district. So the hotel, where it sits, is a hotel in the regional business district. It's my understanding there may be another hotel on the other side that's also in the regional business district. But these are condos. People live there year-round. You know, I'll just throw out as an example, I know it's a kind of a hot topic in Detroit right now. There's, you know, people that live in homes that back up to a heavy industrial site, and there's a lot of back and forth over noise and you know, smell complaints. Yeah, it's an industrial area, but it's still on, you know, the responsibility falls on the operator of that industry to keep the neighboring properties protected from whatever operations go in there next door. So, you know, to say that this is just a, you know, a free-for-all commercial amusement park kind of location and disregard the fact that people live there and, you know, pay taxes and raise families there, you know, should be taken into consideration.
Good point. Yes, sir.
But if this property is located in regional business, would this just water sports standalone be allowed to operate in this location?
So they would come
Yeah.
and make application, is that correct?
Yes,
So-
there'd be a site plan review.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess one thing I've reading through this and thinking about it the past couple of months that I've been kind of curious about, obviously the conversation about the Irish Boat Shop has come up. There's been some site plan reviews on it during the midst of all this this conversation. Different topic, but I guess I'm curious since Claire's not here, maybe Mr. Wendling, you can kind of lay out, let's say in a perfect scenario. Sugar Beach didn't exist there. There was no TC Water Sports. We were back in pre-95. How would this, you know, if the township and the applicants were checking the boxes and going by the book through this process, how would that go? Let's just say they wanted to build a hotel with this accessory use.
Oh, you mean if they wanted to do the combination on there?
Yeah.
I usually do leave that up to the planners there, but under the ordinance, I think before, and I think it's been eliminated out of the ordinance, that the township didn't allow for dual primary uses, okay, in the zoning districts. And I think that's been changed recently, if I recall. Now you can do each one as a standalone. I don't believe that existed back, 10, 15 years ago. So that was probably part of the hindrance on that. Is, pick one and then everything else is an accessory or it's not allowed. So nowadays, it could very well be a requirement that if you're putting up a hotel and the services are not directly related to guest services or primary related as to the hotel activities, and I think and that's a factual question. Unique to East Bay because these hotels are resort hotels. They're not the same as, Quality Inn and I-75 where there's no restaurant and you get breakfast included as part of your hotel, and that's basically it, although some of them may have conference rooms and do catering. You do have a lot more in these amenities, so not every hotel is the same, and so the township also considers that on these applications that these resort hotels are not identical to other typical hotels that are not located, in the much less on the waterfront, which allows for additional type of uses of a resort hotel that a non-waterfront hotel wouldn't have. And then, of course, being in a resort area, even accessory uses to existing hotels that are not on the waterfront but may have greater amenities that otherwise would operate or be considered to operate as a standalone business, such as a restaurant. And I think part of that is done, or at least a good attempt was made to explain that under Section 221 definition. And I included the regular definition of accessory uses in your findings of fact, although it's basically repeated, although with some explanation under 2211, saying, well, wait a minute, if you had this, pool, that's, where someone just wants to build a community center with a pool, like a YMCA or something, this is going to be a separate type of use. But if you have the same amenities like a YMCA with a weight room and a pool, but it's part of the subdivision development, even though other people may come in there, we're going to consider that to be an amenity there. So your tripping point has to do with the amount of use that this accessory use or non-accessory use gets that is not related to the hotel business, and that's really the tougher dividing line, and that's, I think, what you're discussing right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, how about Larry's Place? Everyone remember that here? That was bar was the most popular bar in Traverse City. It was packed, and there was no hotel guests in that place. And I don't know, did we get complaints about that? It was loud, and there's lots of boats right in front of that place. Trust me, I was there.
It's before my time, Carl.
How old am I?
Good point.
But anyways, that's throwing that out there. Larry's Place, that was,
So,
And
is there,
I'd also point out the fact, kind of going back to your definition of the accessory use, I think it's pretty clear in the definition, an accessory use shall not generate any effects on neighboring properties, including, but not limited to, the first one is noise. I would expect that outside of an emergency generator, there's no internal combustion engines operating as a normal procedure at a hotel. And we're talking about, 26 of them in this case. They're noisy.
Yeah, you may
By
have,
nature.
beach volleyball tournaments going on or whatever goes on, outdoor bar areas. I imagine, I haven't gone to any of the hotels here, at least in the summertime. I live in Bel Air, so I don't kind of avoid that, but there's enough going on there already with bars in Bel Air. I think there's 8 of them in one block, but in any event, it is this accessory use and mixing with the hotel type of use. It's not the same in every community. You have to look at your own community, the history of how it's developed, the nature of these hotel resorts, both on the waterfront, off the waterfront, given the tourist industry here. That's part of your deliberations here.
thank you. So let's revisit findings of fact, specific number 1. We can read through it one more time and then discuss further if you wish and vote.
One other thing, Mr. Chairman, I did, listen to Mr. Gonzalez's, and I did draft a basic finding of fact that would fall along with Mr. Gonzalez's analysis here. It's a very rough one. If I could read it out, it might help. Is that the board finds that the water sports business grew into a separate business based on their expansion over the years, such that they could exist absent any hotel operation, given the existing bottomland lease, both from 2007 as well as the one that was passed in March of 2021. And then you would attach exhibits, which you have plenty of here that would go with that. I just wanted to provide some help in putting your thoughts on paper.
Brilliantly said.
Okay. So I just,
No, that's fine.
okay.
I submit
Just
that-
so you know it's there.
I submit that to the board.
Thank you. All right, so let's read through it, and we can decide whether or not to add additional findings of fact
Sure.
throughout this proceeding. But again, number one, the board finds that under Section 221, that TC Water Sports, hereinafter Water Sports operations at the Sugar Beach Hotel, hereinafter Hotel, is a substantial, standalone commercial boat rental operation which rents to tourists, whether they are guests of the hotel or not, and constitutes a substantial and separate primary use of the hotel waterfront during the summer season. The board further finds that water sports operations and rental are not integrally related to the hotel use, and in particular of the hotel's waterfront area. As such, the board finds that the boat rental business is not an accessory use under Section 221 of the zoning ordinance. So how do we feel about supporting that or not? And are there any changes that might be necessary to make it more accurate regardless of which way we vote?
Personally, I'd blend number 1 with some parts of number 3.
Okay? Would you like to take a stab at it?
Well, I would, oh boy. I guess.
I mean, both number 3 and 1 both state that it's not an accessory use. Number 3 toward the end on there, just.
Right,
just
what
so you know.
I'm suggesting is that actually, number 3 is probably more concise because it does address the statute of limitations.
Okay. Can we affirm or deny both number 1 and number 3?
Yeah, you can, you're free to juggle this stuff if you want to and just
Okay.
come up with the one that you want or a separate one or one of these and an additional one. That's up to you folks there. But yeah, you don't have to go one by one. It's not like we're going through variance standards for dimensional variance. This is an all-in-one type of thing, so.
Okay. Thanks. So any discussion on number 1 or any proposed changes to number 1, knowing that number 2 and number 3 can be separate and we can add additional findings at any time?
We can't have ones that are inconsistent, that's all.
Well, of course, of course. But if we come up with other facts that we feel are important, we may state them.
Correct.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Well, obviously, I think it's an accessory use, so I wouldn't agree with 1 or 3, but,
Okay.
okay.
Let's vote then. Who is in favor of finding fact number 1 to be true? May we please have a roll call vote?
Well, is there a motion on the table?
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Mr. Wendling, I don't know that we were completely clear, water's kind of clear as mud on this issue related to the board and I think I understand what we're doing. What does the motion look like?
Well, first of all, you're just going through whether certain findings are acceptable. You can either do that by motion or basically do a straw poll amongst the members. But in the end, you're going to have a consolidating motion that basically states that the board finds, that based upon the specific and the following or following 1 or more specific findings of fact that the use is, A, not an accessory use because X, Y, Z, which I have in both of the first and the third one, or is an accessory use and that the zoning administrator's decision is upheld based upon the August 18th, 2021 letter, which is the second choice here, plus any additions that go along and are consistent with that.
So thank you for that, and thank you for your explanation. And with that, I'd like to retract my request for a vote, and I would rather continue with a straw poll. You believe the business is an accessory use?
I believe it's an accessory use, but the one caveat, I wish it would be capped a lot more than 1610, but I just think it's an accessory use, so that's why I can't agree with 1 or 3. And I think that's the big issue here is accessory use.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I got to say.
Mr. Cook, how do you feel?
I'm going along with 1 and 3.
Okay,
And just to be clear, although it's finding of fact number 2, the basis of it is contrary to 1 and 3 anyways. It does state, finding of fact 2 does state that it's the hotel's, or it's operated use at the hotel as a boat and jet ski rental facility has occurred well over a decade without complaint until the 2020 rental season. Is it accurate for us to state that it has operated without a complaint? Maybe we don't have them documented. They may have happened
Well,
to
you
the
could say
hotel.
that
without a documented complaint?
without.
A township documented complaint.
Without a township document, maybe is more accurate if they don't have any documentation related to it.
Okay.
I just got one question. Do we require written complaints in East Bay Townships, or is it accepted verbally? Because
It
we
doesn't
don't.
have to be in writing.
Oh, okay. See, because we are all in writing. Every complaint we get has to be in writing.
But it is important for the zoning administrator that once you receive a complaint.
We could just document the verbal
That's where the
conversation.
documentation
Okay.
comes in. Yep.
That's kind of a tangent I went on, but.
Okay, thanks.
Dave, if I might, am I allowed to chime in here, or am I
course.
just? Okay, I just
Of course, sir.
didn't call on me. I guess I would say that the original intent, I think, was correct. And I think generally, like Carl says, I think it got to a point where it just exploded. And that's the point we have to look at and say, okay, if we can take it back to that point and then go from there, that would be my suggestions or my thoughts. So I would say that I'm with Carl, and is it 1 and 3 do not apply, that I think it is a use.
It is an accessory?
It is, yes.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
or
you.
that was the intention when it first came, and that's what I think,
All right, thank you very much.
Just to clarify, because 1 and 3, if you choose that, though, you're going to find that it's basically not an accessory use, okay? That it's, even though it may have been at one time, it's no longer, and that's why 1 and 3 kind of go tandem together, because we have to still address this Fraser-Haney case and the 6-year statute of limitations, so.
So just to I'm gonna split hairs a little bit here, but I think that's what this is kind of all about at this point. The determination we're making on accessory use, although I don't necessarily 100% disagree with the two of you, is not based on what it used to be, but it's based on the determination that was made in the zoning administrator's letter at the time. So, it's tough to kind of separate that in your mind and say, hey, when it was a smaller approved use with a few boats and jet skis, then that was okay. But what's in front of us now is what was happening, I guess, this summer or last summer when the complaints came
Yes,
in.
yes.
2020.
The expanded use that was not in alignment with what was previously approved. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
They've done an excellent job of developing and building a very good business. And in the sense, they grew up. And again, yeah, if in fact the original intent was to be with the hotel for the hotel guests, I have no problem with that. But once you started to expand out and you start funneling others into this one location, you're now a standalone business and probably can exist as a standalone business.
I guess that was the point I was trying to make, is it got to a point where it started off fine, and then it kind of went crazy and can now stand alone. So if
Would not be an accessory use then.
it wouldn't be now, but again, I agreed at the time it.
Right.
Right,
was
I
correct.
think we all agree that at the original time, that it was well-reasoned, and we probably would have supported that. I also agree with Mr. Cook that we have to look at this specifically as of the date that the zoning administrator wrote his letter.
Yes.
So, I think we have 3 yeses to affirm number 1. Are there any amendments to number 1 that anybody feels strongly about, if that's where we end up?
Do we want, in kind of the spirit of this last little comment, do we want to add that maybe where, let's see, it's like the 3rd or 4th sentence, says the board further finds that TC Water Sports operation and rental are not integrally related to the hotel use? Can we state in its operational state as of the letter dated, I can't remember what.
August 18th
Yeah,
of
August
2020,
18th.
yes.
Yeah,
Sure.
to be more specific.
That, I support that. Anybody else have suggestions for changes, additions, omissions?
Well, only, again, where I would pick up in number 3, where they'll say the paragraph, the board further finds that the use about midway down has been ongoing for more than 6 years at the applicable statute of limitations. So we're just taking that last paragraph of number 3 and tacking it on to number 1.
How would you feel about, let's work through number 2, and then let's take a look at number 3 separately?
That's fine. However you want to proceed.
So if we're done discussing findings of fact number 1, number 2 says, finding of fact which supports the zoning administrator's determination letter of August 18th, 2021, the board finds that the historic use of the hotel waterfront as a boat and jet ski rental facility has occurred for well over a decade without complaint until the 2020 rental season. The board further finds that the zoning administrator reasonably decided to freeze the use with respect to the number of boats at the 2020 level of intensity, as that is the year that the use began to generate complaints from residents at Port Traverse condominium, hereinafter Port Traverse. The board finds that beginning in 2020, the use generated noise in a manner that became more burdensome and as such violated the provision of section 221.2.c of the zoning ordinance, such that further expansion from that year would result in continuous violation. The board finds that the use is an accessory use and that the zoning administrator's letter of August 18th, 2021 correctly states that boats in excess of the use in place as of 2020 will result in a violation of section 221.2.c. Discussion, support?
Well, everyone knows how I feel, but this is the one time where the only thing I would like to change, which I don't think it matters because I think it's an accessory use, but I would still like to find out somehow what those numbers were from 2016, and maybe if both parties would agree to that, but I know the accessory use is the big thing for everybody, but that's the only thing I would throw out there.
Okay.
But I don't think anyone's going to agree to that.
Further discussion, comments?
I don't, the way this is laid out, under the circumstances and the information we've got tonight, I don't agree that it's an accessory use, based on the August 18th letter. But if we're going to have a discussion about this, I just wanted to make sure that this finding of fact number 2 would be, if it is included in any motion, to make sure that it's amended to add that caveat about the complaints, whether the
Yeah, all you would
documented
do, if you
complaints.
wanted to convert it, you'd basically say it's not an accessory use, and the evidence finds that, due to noise and so forth, that it violates that, section 221 2 lowercase c. And just simplify it, you could do it that way.
So we could simply not find that as a fact, number 2, and not support that. Is that correct?
You could either not support that or modify it so it reads that it's not an accessory use, and, it adds in the one reason that because it violates in its current state, section 2212C. That's, part of what Preston was grappling with, based on the complaints.
Okay.
Would that be just a separate finding of fact, like
You
number
could
10?
do it as a separate if you wish to, yes, that's up to you.
How do you feel about it?
Since, I don't know if you want to make that in the final summary or make that as a separate item 10.
Up to you.
I suggest making number 10.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty
Oh,
guys
under the
probably should have,
general.
'cause 2's not gonna get approved anyway, so might as well just,
Go ahead, Matt.
You're talking about adding that to the general finding of facts?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Okay.
suggesting.
Okay. Okay with you?
Well, I mean, if it's a finding that's specific to whether it's an accessory use, you probably just add it to your specific findings on there. But we already know the section, that's in the general, but,
Okay.
that's, I mean,
That's your,
that part is already in there. I think it's on number, the quotation from the ordinance there was on number 6. So if you want to use that section as saying, well, it's not an accessory use now, and here's another reason, for example, that it's not in compliance with 2212C, you can do that, or you can ignore it. It's up to you. Or
Okay.
do something else.
any thoughts on that, John?
Number 6 actually is a statement of what the ordinance is, whereas this sentence says that the board finds that beginning in 2020, the use generated noise in a manner that became more burdensome.
Yeah, which makes it more of a specific.
Which is more specific, yeah.
If you did that, yeah.
John?
I'm trying to follow this a little bit here. I did a lot of reading yesterday, but I'm trying to get in and out of this. I still agree with Carl, I guess, going back to that, is that if there's a way to find out what was in 2016 and just saying, let's go back to that until such a time that some other things are figured out in court, or if the Irish boat thing takes off and they can put a dock over there, as I understand, then we go in that direction. But if it's going to continue, then it's not a auxiliary use at the hotel. It's a standalone. So unless they back it off to where it was not an issue, then that's where I stand.
And that's just a matter of enforcement. That's
Right.
why, because of the statute of limitations. That's all it is. So that would be an enforcement argument.
So,
Okay. So do we want to discuss potential fact number 2 anymore, or do we want the straw poll at this time, see where we're at? All right, Carl, do you support number 2 or not?
yeah, I support it.
Okay.
I would still like to go back to 2016, but I think doesn't matter at this point, so.
Okay, Mr. Cook?
In its current state, I would not support
Okay,
finding of fact number 2.
Mr. Gonzalez?
I agree, in the current state, I cannot support this.
Okay. And Mr. Ewan?
I would say in the current state, I wouldn't support it either. It would have to be changed.
Thank you. All right, so if we may move on to number 3, and it says findings of fact which would not support the zoning administrator's determination letter of August 18th, 2021. It reads, "The board finds that the use of the hotel property by water sports, jet ski, and boat rental business expanded from the original use as an amenity for hotel guests only to a use which is open to the general public. The board finds that similar uses of hotel properties in a regional business zoning district include such uses as restaurants within existing hotels, which the Zoning Board of Appeals notes also serve guests other than those staying on any given hotel property. However, the board further finds that the boat rental business by water sports at the hotel includes transfers of boats from off-site facilities, further concentrating the use on the waterfront of the hotel for customers, which at this juncture are not necessarily hotel guests, including the movement of boats and the pickup of rental boats from off-site areas being brought to the hotel site. The board further finds that the use has been ongoing for more than 6 years and that the applicable statute of limitations under MCL 600.5813, while precluding enforcement for a violation of the zoning ordinance for this use for transgressions existing 6 years or older, enforcement based upon activity 6 years or younger can occur, allowing for a limitation of the use based on existing 2016 use levels and not 2020 as provided in the zoning administrator's letter of August 18th, 2021. The board finds that the use is not an accessory use under section 221. All right, and suggestions for modifications and how you feel about support or not of number 3, please.
I could support that.
All right, thank you.
I guess the only comment I'd have is the 2016 date may be bumped up a little bit. I don't think there's any trouble back in those years, somewhere in between, so there might be a leeway of getting a few more boats for TC Waters boats in there as part of their base.
Okay.
That's what I'm going after, so.
Just want to make sure that, so everybody understands that that's, because if it's not an accessory use, this is strictly an enforcement issue, and that's why you have the 2016, because if it's not allowed, it's not allowed, but then we're stuck with, going back only for the 6 years, potentially. I mean, even a court could potentially say, well, it's not been enforced at all, but, that's the best compromise we have, so.
Okay.
The statute.
And the court could also say it is accessory use.
That's right, we don't.
Sure.
That's all I got.
Okay.
So if we go back, the 6 years based on the statute of limitations to 2016, then everybody says, well, we don't know what the basis of the amount were of watercraft there. I'd like to be able to somehow reference maybe the original 2007 permit, which was, I guess,
Yes.
enforceable at that time.
And that's part of the
one.
exhibits, and that would be an exhibit that
Okay.
goes with it. Yes, I think it's already done, but we'll make sure that if it isn't, it's included as an exhibit on your final minutes.
Okay.
So how do you recommend including that recommendation within the findings of fact? Is it necessary?
The recommendation of
2007?
of the, including that, yeah, that's fine. The exhibit, we just add that into the exhibits, because that's one of the exhibits that's, material in here.
All right.
Yeah, it looks like Exhibit A.
Yeah.
All right, any other suggestions, modifications? And John, do you support number 3 or do you not support number 3?
Support it.
Okay, thank you. And Paul?
Yes.
And Mr. Cook?
Yes, referencing Exhibit A.
Okay. And could you make that note? Thank you. And Carl?
No, just because of the accessory use
Okay,
definition.
all right. Thank you. So right now, with the several recommendations for modifications to the findings of fact, which our recording secretary has
He's on top.
noted very effectively.
She didn't know it was gonna be this long of a meeting.
You got it all, right?
I got you. Don't worry.
Okay.
We have our straw poll of findings of fact for number 1, 2, and 3. Are there any additional findings of fact that you feel strongly we should put into our deliberations here and document? All right, next I will ask Mr. Wendling if he can suggest a motion based on our straw polls in action.
Well, it appears that you have, everybody's voting here, right? If they have a,
You've been sworn in, John?
I've been sworn in.
Okay.
I'm all set to go. I didn't know, I'm just the alternate, so if somebody's missing, I guess I vote. If not, I guess I don't vote, so I'm,
Certainly.
Yeah, and the vote has to be made, and it looks like it will be made by a majority of the existing ZBA members in any event for this here, and it looks like that's the case between, the chair and Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Cook as well. So if that's the case, then someone could make a motion that, based upon both the general and specific findings of fact as supported by the exhibits, the Zoning Board of Appeals has determined that the use is not an accessory use, because that's ultimately what it is. How that shakes out on enforcement is, all about it, but that's something that the township will have to handle.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Oh, boy. I try to keep it simple.
Trying to figure out how to word this thing.
What he said, that's all you gotta say.
Yeah,
I don't know, Sarah, did you take that down, what I mentioned? Okay. I mean, I'll repeat it again. The motion would be that, based upon both the specific, both the general and specific findings of fact, and the exhibits attached, use legal jargon there too, the board finds that the TC Water Sports jet ski and boat rental is not an accessory use to the beach hotel.
so moved.
Okay, moved. Do we have support?
Support.
Moved and supported. Do we have any discussion? All right, I would like to request a roll call vote at this time.
Ewing,
yes.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Stuzinski,
No.
Hausman.
Yes. All right, motion passed. Thank you.
Again, these findings as updated with the exhibits will be part of your January board packet for approval, just so you know.
So noted. Yes, sir. All right, may we please start with the town board report?
Last Board of Trustees meeting was last night. I actually wasn't in attendance, had something come up, but I think the flavor of the meeting was pretty vanilla from what I understand. There was some budget amendments, and I think there was a leave policy discussion. That's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. And may we please have a planning commission report?
Yeah, the planning commission did some administrative setting of dates and drafting the annual report to the trustees. We've begun a discussion on an amendment to expand the multiple use in other districts other than the 2 or 3 districts that we currently have. And that would be an amendment. And we approved the Brigantine apartment development, which we had mentioned before. That's about 39 acres, 192 units.
And where is that, please?
That is between Vanderlip, I want to get this straight, and 4 Mile. So it's primarily between those two. There's a small section on Hammond. Basically, that's that area up there. And then we had a site visit and have begun discussion on a multiple use of the property, which is on US 31 on 4 Mile and on 31 next to Hopscotch. And that would be 8 acres, and that will be 2 2 hotels and a retail establishment.
That's the vacant eyesore chain link fence property that's been there for a while?
That's the vacant, one of the vacant eyesore
Okay.
chain link properties, yes. And that should be, that would be both something like about 243 hotel rooms.
Wow.
So,
Okay, thank you.
right.
All right, and at this time, we have another opportunity for public comment. If anybody in the audience wishes to speak on any topic, here's your opportunity. Please tell us who you are, your address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Christopher Bisdock, 616 7th Street, Traverse City. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Would anybody else care to speak?
I will just speak from my seat, but I do want to thank you people for all your hard work. And we know that to serve in government bodies is a big responsibility. And I think you've shown that tonight, which is really conscientious. And I'm proud to be the person who lives in East Bay Township.
Thank you. Would anybody else care to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Sam Console, 1717, 31 North. I reiterate everything that Irene said. Thank you very much. If you need help with your exhibits to help find them or whatever, I know that you've gotten a lot of paperwork. I'm willing to help. So give you some clarification, like I wanted to scream out, go to page 50! So anyway, I will go away. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else care to speak? All right, hearing none, we will adjourn.
Well, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry